I could just start by saying thank you. We're so really moved to be included, and it speaks to the spirit of New York in general. Our impression of our feeling for New York is that the Architectural League of New York would be inclusive of Mexico and Canada. So, and we're really lucky to be invited for the second time by the Architecture League to share our work. So, back in I think 2002, when we were really just finishing school, we were invited as part of the Young Architects program.
Can we move this a little forward for you? Would that be good?
Yeah.
Perhaps? Hopefully.
Thank you.
And thank you all for coming. And it's quite overwhelming to follow Tatiana. It was so impressive and inspiring. And I feel a little bit almost like
Nervous?
frauds or nervous. No, definitely nervous. But, frauds. Yeah, we're kind of architects, and we're also very much not. So we've tried to find a path that just allows us to work in a way that's very intuitive, and oops, sorry, just 1 second here. And so we set up Molo in 2004 because we'd really recognized that we wanted to set up a quite specific way of working and a business model around it so that it's really been a matter of designing a way of working in the past year since then, but that we specifically wanted to step away from client work, and we realize we're not very good at it. It's not so much that we don't think it's an important model, it's just we're not so good at it. We essentially make things for ourselves, and then we sell them. And we kind of put things out into the world, and then that funds ongoing research and development of ideas. And we think best when we're working with our hands. We're very much makers, and so somehow along the way we become merchants and makers, maybe more than architects. But the one challenge for us in this approach is that we're, of course, very much interested in architecture, and specifically cities and public places. And we wanted to make sure that our work wasn't limited to private spheres. So in funding our own work, it's one of the challenges. In particular, we're interested in shared human experiences. And not to compare our work to theirs, but we very much admire the work of Christian and Jean-Claude, and in the way that they've been able to follow their own intuition and set up an entrepreneurial way of self-funding all those dreams and ideas that they've had, and sharing them with the world after they've found a way to pay for them themselves.
The ephemerality of building from snow made it possible for us to build a very public gathering space, free of any kind of bureaucracy, codes, or bylaws. We were invited with other architects and designers to take part in a celebration of the Alaskan winter. At the time we were invited, it was the summer, and so on a beach in Tofino, we started working and shaping sand, trying to come up with ideas for making a place of gathering. The idea we had was a simple one, to create an abstract space in snow and light from the huge northern sky as a roof. We wanted to make an intimate place in the city, but buffered from the city with a long passageway. When we arrived on the site, it was New Year's Day. This is probably about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It was completely black, and it was -30. And we were working about 12 hours a day at -30, which is pretty intense.
Canadians aren't really all used to that kind of weather.
The snow was so cold that we couldn't shape it. Originally, we had intended to shape it into by hand into mounds, and then carve from it. So instead, we began to shovel it, stir it, and pile it just to get a sense of the characteristics of the snow we had. Another challenge was that the snow was coming from parking lots. It was full of sand and gravel, mittens, McDonald's garbage, all kinds of refuse. There were no treasures, unfortunately. But the crystalline structure, it had been broken from so much movement, yet there was still some potential. We just had to find it. Rather than piling the snow, we did start to float it into formwork, and we found that it was cold enough and it was still crystalline enough to sinter, which is when the snow crystals join each other if they're piled loosely enough and create a solid mass. At this point, we were lucky enough to secure a loader and an excavator, and we started piling the snow into formwork held by our bodies in 8-inch lifts, and every 90 minutes, the snow would solidify and let us go up to the next level. As the walls were rising higher and higher, we could see a resemblance in the sort of roughness of the tops to the mountains in the background, and so we thought that we would leave it that way. We also noticed the point at which the highest sun was meeting the top of the wall, and so we stopped at that point. There were several other improvisations along the way, which was a part of what this would be all about. One was to cut a narrow opening and make stairs with ice. Originally, there were no stairs, and I'd always wanted to cut ice with a chainsaw. So we also were able to narrow the openings up by literally allowing the formwork to collapse onto our bodies as we were holding the snow back, letting it come closer and closer, making a very narrow crevice that you would literally have to squeeze through to enter into the passageway.
Like the highway merging. That's different.
The shape of the room also serves to frame the sky. We anticipated interesting things to be experienced with the phenomena of the low northern light, the aurora, and the perception of scale, all connecting the vast celestial sphere with human dimensions. The finished form was anonymous except for the textured wall and the entry crevice marked only by a wall of firewood. Experienced from within, the passageway itself is infinite. It's a place of silence between the inner gathering space and the outside city. As you pass through it, the city really did disappear, and it felt like you were entering into something almost sacred. That wasn't how we intended it, and I think every time you passed by someone in such a narrow space, you actually felt like you were sharing this experience. There were a lot of smiles exchanged. We had invited a friend of ours, Ethan Rose, who's a sound artist, to join us. And while we were building, Ethan was recording ice flows and crunching snow and melting ice. And he came up with a three-part sound piece that was played into the center of the space through a 4-channel system. And as you're winding yourself through the passageway, you'd start to hear the sounds, not quite knowing at first that it was a sound piece, but then discovering that, and at the same time also smelling the wood burning fire in the center. Once in the gathering space, people, strangers, became part of a single group. It turned out, too, that people started stewarding the fire and bringing firewood to the site, watching over, and they would stay there all night. Oftentimes, people, after finding out there was this secret room in their city, they'd come back and bring their friends and some food and some wine. We were told that one evening an impromptu story session had started up, and each person was in turn telling their story of what brought them to live under the Alaskan sky.
So working at a small scale for us has allowed us to fund our own projects, even when we could barely afford to feed and house ourselves. We could not finance a building, but we could afford to make a teapot. And we started by making 3 for ourselves and our parents, and then showed the design publicly by entering it in the Architectural Review's AR&D Awards. It won an award that normally is given to buildings, and when someone in Switzerland saw it, they wanted 300, and we hadn't really thought about how we'd even sell one, so we decided we should think about it quickly, and within about a month, we'd incorporated Molo and as an entity that would structure the manufacturing and distribution of all these smaller scale things that we always naturally found ourselves designing. The intimate scale of the small things that we touch has so much potency in the experience of space and ritual. And so designing a tea set for us has a lot of the same types of themes and ideas as we would take to designing a building or space. This vessel has a double glass wall with a vacuum for insulation between, and that allowed us to step away from short and stout with a handle and a spout. A sphere obviously has the least amount of surface to volume ratio, so it's a way of slowing down the tea getting cold, but with a vacuum, we could have something very simple in line and easily held in the hand. We had a glass teapot that we loved, designed by Willem Wagenfeld in 1932, that had this long spout that you could never clean. And but so for practical and poetic purposes, we designed ourselves a teapot, and the color of the tea is the visual expression, and the warming candle below lights up the tea and also keeps it piping hot for hours. And then we named it a tea lantern because its importance as a sort of center of ambient light and gathering is as important as the tea. The family of glassware grew. The suspended bowl design gives a temperature gradient so that if you want to warm your hands, you hold it near the top, and then if it's too hot, you hold it near the bottom. And with cold things, the condensation occurs as fine drops on the underside of the bowl rather than at the table surface. And you're not warming the drink with your hand. It turns out that ice ball is a standard size in Japan for serving scotch. Just happened to fit. And Muji sells them, and the ice molds, and MoMA shop. But we drank a lot, trying out proportions for all different beverages. It's a good summer. For sake, liqueur,
Several
espresso, yeah. And iced tea. And so this is the full family of float at this point. And
Oh, it's a very
you can't
faint
really see
family.
it. There's 2 master glass
I'll
blowers
just
in
show
the
this.
Czech Republic that blow all the pieces of the glassware with a great deal of skill.
It's the paper wall.
So this wall is 10 feet tall and made of nothing but tissue paper, air, and geometry. And we began playing with this very same tissue paper, making tiny little scale models, thinking about how you might fold away a bedroom when you're not sleeping in it, or a wall or furniture. And we were thinking of our own very small space that we were trying to live and work in. And the scale models grew and grew and grew, and it turned out that the tissue paper was a legitimate material, a legitimate building material, and we wouldn't have preconceived that until actually playing with it and experimenting. So we can still continue to sell walls out of this tissue paper, and as well as a few other materials as the family's grown. Similar to the wall boats, in some ways, we have this sort of set of things that feel static, but really they're under constant development. And so it's now a fully modular system with magnetic end panels and tunnels that run through the walls. And so that you have a series of modular nodes that can work across sizes and materials and ways of integrating lighting and other accessories.
This piece is made entirely from brown craft paper, like paper bag paper. It's a mix of 50% recycled and 50% new fiber. And the new fiber, it's important, the recycled fiber is chopped up and quite short, and new fiber is long. And this mixture allows for enough strength and durability. These stools have a similar magnetic end panel to the walls. Everything it seems is coming closer and closer together now in its refinement. And these are also a little bit like building blocks, but they have a denser cell. These are the same stools, but they can be stretched into benches of infinite form. They're like abstract building blocks, and you can do what you want with them, pretty much. When we were designing the seating, we were thinking of how we could just have a spontaneous surprise environment, literally just have a spontaneous party.
We had no furniture whatsoever either, so it would be a good idea.
Another consideration in the design process for this line of products has been, and it's an important one for us, is the idea of the design process continuing with the person using the pieces.
Yeah. So for us, the design process is a very open-ended one in that we don't necessarily set out to make something in particular. We're very open to happy accidents and what might happen along the way. And then in turn, the pieces themselves are very much like that, where people will use them in ways we hadn't thought about. the building blocks really do feel like Lego. If anyone, I'm sure most of you all grew up playing with Lego. But there's
Stretchy Lego.
stretchy Lego, and you just start moving them around, playing, stretching, and you kind of realize there's a real. It's not just the movement of the pieces, but the movement of your body in relationship to them is very different from. And kind of liberating to what most people would think of as a wall, because anyone can start to move their walls and move that with them, and with a kind of level of control that they might have over their clothing. So with the holes running through the building blocks, you can, one of the things you can do is just roll up a simple piece of paper and put it through the hole, and as you open the block along that tube of paper, you let the tube spring open and friction fit inside the block, and you have this completely rigid beam. And so that lets you start to make windows and roofs and any kind of structure. The urchin soft lights are kind of like the pets of the family, as something that you're touching with both of your hands. And so the elastic honeycomb geometry can rotate in and around itself, and can even turn inside out to create straight-walled forms. So one side of the form is curved and the other is straight, to have cylinders and cones. And it's a tactile lesson in geometry.
They're almost hatching, but not quite. These, with the urchins, we originally they were solid pieces. So it's a lobe that's wrapped around itself to make this shape. And then more recently, everything develops over time, which is fascinating for us. But more recently, we started to cut the smallest one from the medium-sized one, and the medium-sized one from the largest one, or from the large one and to the largest one, and so on, like a Russian doll. That made the use of material quite efficient, and it also has made it a more interesting moire effect with a cavity in between. This is a white textile version of the soft block modular system. It's translucent in sunlight, and we're now lighting these with LED, so they're lights and they're partitions, and they can be display pieces. It just sort of, again, it's infinite. The LED just simply goes through the holes in the walls that Stephanie was describing. And while inside, they still maintain their flexibility. This is Cloud, and it's the most recent piece we've been working on. It hasn't been released yet, but we will be releasing it in Milan.
In Milan next
in a month.
or 2 weeks.
Yeah. With this piece, we've made a modular unit that can literally like create an undulating surface on a ceiling, a canopy of light. And these pieces are also lit within by LED, and they're softly radiant from literally any angle that they're viewed from.
And making thousands of soft walls with wool felt end panels on them, we created only a tiny bit of waste material, but from every wall there are 4 little strips of felt, and we couldn't bear to throw them out, so we've been saving them for 5 years, and we have about half a container load of them now. And so it's kind of the end of an era because we've switched completely to the magnetic end panels where it's only, every wall is only one material. It doesn't have a separate material at the end. So we, like the wall children making toys with the scraps from the boats, we are making things with all the scraps from these. And we just started connecting them, and we're just going to keep doing that until they're all gone. But and make a giant tapestry rug.
Well, just, we wanted to just share a few images from the studio. Ours is it's an environment like, many others. We're mixing a regular day-to-day production, the work that goes out the door. We sell it and we distribute it and send it off. And we're constantly working on pieces and always looking at ways of developing and improving components, packaging, how we ship things. Literally everything. We're no one else. There's no one else. I mean, if we're not doing something right, it's completely up to us to make it better. And for us, that's design. We design by making. The development of a design is like an evolution, and sometimes it happens over a very long period as we make the pieces and use them and learn from them.
The studio is larger than it was when we were figuring out how to partition it with paper walls, but Todd and I still live in the studio. Everybody else goes home at night. We find beauty and delight in almost any process or corner of the work.
Recently, we started adding handles to the soft seating.
That's how the soft walls store on hooks. So when they're completely flat, they're only about 2 inches thick, and in that same dimension, they all open 15 feet long. And we love making things, and we probably spend far too much obsessive time doing it, and we realized at some point that we forget to go outside. And then the one last project that we're going to share is in Japan. We were originally taking part in an international competition, and the brief was for 200 units of housing together with a number of public, or a kind of open-ended idea of proposing what public amenities would make living at the heart of the city desirable. And the city of Aomori is in the north, and it's kind of a mid-sized city, and it suffers from a similar problem to a lot of mid-sized cities all over the world, where the downtown had kind of hollowed out as the city had sprawled on its edges. And so we entered the competition primarily as a way to further our exploration and ideas about high-density urban housing and living in the city with a sense of nature in the seasons. We wanted to explore abstract expressions of the sort of multitude of lives gathered behind all these windows, and so through a layered glass facade that created an outdoor room in the city, the sort of project developed around this outdoor room, and with a frozen pond as the plaza in winter, and a pool that would cool the air in summer, and a grassy hill that rose from one corner and connected the kindergarten and the second level to outside, and created a roof for the community space that sat like a stage on the water. The the jury was Tadao Endo and Jean Nouvel, and we were just a year and a half out of architecture school, and 2,000 people entered from 89 countries, and we won. We were really surprised. We'd actually made we were specifically not looking for client-based work, but so we have been working with the city of Aomori now for 7.5 years, and it's been an incredible, amazing adventure. The small private rooms in this study folded open like drawers, and so this is part of that same study that the folding walls and things developed out of, but just a different way about going about it, where the very modest sized family apartment could take on the spaciousness of the borrowed space from the bedrooms when they're closed. During the competition, there was no site. Well, it switched, and they told us we had to pretend there was no site, and then they found a site that was right on the waterfront, and it was so perfectly strategic in terms of a piece of land that might do good for the city. Is beside the train station, at the terminus of the pedestrian shopping street, where the fish market and the library were, and it was fenced off with chain link, and they were using it to park buses on. So it wasn't owned by the city; it was a private bus company, and so we told them, yeah, that's a fantastic piece of land. If you can buy it, the city should own that land. It's the one thing kind of blocking you off from your waterfront, and so this became the site, and we tested the program of the 200 units of housing and different public facilities, really trying to give a lot of permeability to the public part of the program, but it still felt like the housing was like a big plug in this place that was supposed to be public. And we, through many iterations, the housing kept shrinking, and to a point where we asked if it was okay if we just had a caretaker suite and a fully public building. And in the meantime, we were invited back to experience the city in all of the seasons and shown all the things that they were most proud of and that really defined them. And this is Nebuta. They're these incredible paper lanterns. This is about maybe a quarter life size and just a piece of it right now the way it is on the screen. They're huge, enormous lanterns. And they craft about 23 of them each year. And every year, of course, the artists are trying to outdo each other and themselves. And the level of the art is fantastic. And so they're made from washi paper stretched over a wire and wood frame and lit from within with thousands of light bulbs. They used to be lit with candles inside, but that got kind of scary. After experiencing this, we really had no idea. We'd seen it on the postcards, and it's only something that you can fully appreciate through physical experience. It's in the first week of August each year, in the sort of heat and humidity of the summer, and they get 5 million visitors coming to a city of 250,000 people, and everybody takes part. And it's everyone is dancing in the streets and chanting and jumping and the sounds of the huge taiko drums that beat along with the procession of these floats and the wooden flutes on the air. It's really something that I'm not able to do justice to. But it's not only a Japanese cultural festival. It's obviously very much a part of this place. It's also deeply primal and something that anyone visiting really kind of feels at its root. They believe it's connected to the Jaomon roots of the people that lived in this land 5,000 years ago in its sort of spirit. So we're making a house for them. We realized that a house for these creatures, these mythical beasts and heroes, a house for them would be a house for everybody, of course. And so it's situated on the waterfront there. And construction began in April 2009, and the Nebuta House is scheduled to open next summer. The high-speed bullet trains will connect all the way from Tokyo to Aomori starting next December. So it'll be less than 2 hours to get there, which is a huge psychological change for people in Japan and people visiting Japan and coming to this place. And so the exterior of the Nebuta House is enclosed with a screen made from 800 12-meter tall vertical ribbons of steel. And the steel ribbons will be a sort of burnt orange-red color. That's the color of the local lacquerware. And be both bold but at home on the working waterfront of the city with its steel ships and sheds. And as a dwelling place for these mythical giants, we did our best to abstract away from the sort of commonplace detailing that would identify it as a building made by people or for humans. And the irony is that it's actually ends up becoming very handmade in order to do that. But the ribbon screen creates a covered outdoor walkway around the full perimeter of the building, a variation on the engawa in a traditional Japanese house that connects the inside to the outside and the interior of the building with its surroundings. And each of the 820 ribbons becomes individually shaped and twisted to create openings for light, views, and passageways. And it will provide a way for people to engage with the building in day-to-day life, even when on the days that they're not entering, taking a walk along the waterfront and being able to move through the space. The kind of deep wash of color and the dynamic reflections of the shadows and light are kind of a way of giving people a sensory bath, a sort of threshold between going from the regular city and into this sort of mythical place of imagination and storytelling. The ribbon screen is partly inspired by the vertical patterns of light and shadow in the primeval beechwood forests that surround Aomori. It's the largest virgin beechwood forest in the world. And they're also an abstraction of, or sort of an abstraction of the patterns of wind and weather, and influenced by the woodblock prints of Hiroshige Ando. At the entrance, the ribbons sweep around the corner the way the wind might, making a larger opening. And then the route into the Nebuta House winds through the engawa and then on the interior adjacent to it, and then deeper into the darkness of the building where the Nebuta dwell. It's a route defined by a change in light. And at the heart, it's a completely dark place with only the light of the Nebuta. At different times of year, the building will always change because these things are being made every year. And at one point in the spring, they're all pure white, and there's particularly beautiful being able to read a giant toe here and a dragon over here and a tiger, and they're in pieces and parts on the floor because they haven't been assembled, and so they're more this like a landscape that you're moving through, or cloudscape. And earlier in the year, the sort of graceful wire frames and are being constructed. The restaurant is right at the waterfront and sort of layers from the deep, dark parts of the building in private rooms out to the deck. And it'll be the first restaurant in the whole city that has any view of the water. Even though the city's grown up because of, like, it's really an industrial city that's grown up because of its waterfront, there's a real divide in how the city meets it.
These last photos are from a recent site visit. This image is showing the combination structure of columns and window mullions that are assisting the columns and allowing them to be skinnier. It was possible for us to make the window mullions out of solid steel. We have a lot of respect for the construction team. They do incredible work, and they've worked through an extremely challenging winter. A lot of the time on site has been spent removing record amounts of snow from the project. On this trip, we were particularly impressed and delighted with the full-size mock-up, finally being able to see the more final iterations of the steel ribbons. These three colors are just tests, and we're working with a color that's closer to the one on the right, although that's not quite, that's being shown too brightly. The color is one that we're working with. It'll be a lot like the local lacquerware, the sheen and the application, which is this. Again, the color's not coming through properly. Originally, there was a concern that the color we were choosing looked unfinished because it's so close to the color of steel primer. And this was, of course, one of the reasons we liked it. We felt it was at home with the steel ships and sheds, the working parts of the waterfront. Even during construction, we've been able to work towards simpler detailing and construction. In many ways, we want the building to disappear and to become more of a backdrop for the Nebuta. At the ground, the steel will drop into coarse black gravel. This isn't black, of course, but it's a mock-up for now. Everything else in the building will be materials that have been turned to warm shades of black. The window mullions, as I was saying, are solid steel, then galvanized and blackened. The theater and restaurant will also be blackened, but in wood. These photos are taken in a very flat light, but this is where the sun will set, and when it sweeps across, these ribbons will probably light up like fire. Each of the pieces of steel is 12 inches wide, 5/8 of an inch thick, and it's been individually twisted to create a unique line. These ribbons actually do shiver in the wind, and which make them a little bit living. We've been really happy with the collaboration of the team. making this unique level of detailing possible. It also has to do with the particular dedication and skill of the contractor, one of the largest in Japan, Kajima, and a very inspired and skilled engineer, Kanabako-san. Everyone has worked very hard to craft the pieces by hand and by eye, rather than just plotting them on a computer. And there's still huge challenges to come.
Thank you.